The studio lights hummed faintly overhead as the cameras rolled, catching every flicker of movement. It was supposed to be a calm panel, just another Sunday political roundtable, hosted by a major network with the usual mix of party veterans and rising stars. Michael Steele, former RNC chairman, sat with his signature coolness, tailored suit flawless, voice polished from years in the game. Across from him, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett leaned slightly forward, elbows on the table, her eyes sharp, focused, not on the host, but on Steele. The discussion was meant to cover bipartisan cooperation. But it didn't take long before it turned into something else. Steele gestured with his hand, his tone firm yet composed. "At the end of the day," he said, "I'm a Republican first. That's how I approach everything." The words didn't just fall, they landed. Heavy. The host blinked. Another guest shifted uncomfortably. But Jasmine didn't move. She let the silence sit for a beat, one breath, maybe two, before leaning in closer. "Before being human?" she asked. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The weight was in the pause, the way her eyebrows barely raised, the question hanging between them like a challenge too bold to ignore. Steele gave a half-smile, the kind politicians used to deflect. But his eyes gave him away. The host stumbled to redirect, but it was too late. Social media was already clipping the moment. The comment section beneath the live stream exploded. Viewers didn't hear a zinger. They heard a mirror being held up. A moment that cracked through the surface civility. Jasmine leaned back, arms crossed now. Calm. Composed. The air in the studio felt different, charged, uncertain. No one had expected the conversation to flip like that. And Steele, for the first time in the segment, looked like he wasn't sure what to say next. Steele let out a quiet breath, adjusted his tie, and offered a diplomatic chuckle. "That's not what I meant," he said, voice clipped but steady. "I'm talking about principles, about structure, not identity." But Jasmine didn't bite. She tilted her head just slightly, as if weighing his words like evidence. "Structure's great," she replied. "Until it forgets who it's supposed to serve." The sentence wasn't aggressive. But it was surgical. And it cut. The moderator tried to lighten the tone, pivoting toward policy, but even he knew the gravity in the room had shifted. The conversation that followed about education reform, healthcare access, and voter suppression all floated beneath that one question: before being human? It echoed even when unsaid. Backstage, producers were already whispering. A clip team was flagging timestamps. Jasmine's aide texted one word to the communications group chat: moment. Meanwhile, on Twitter, her name trended within 15 minutes. Some viewers were furious, calling her disrespectful. But more were intrigued. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. No outrage. No shouting. Just a single sentence that challenged the foundation of everything Steele had tried to position himself as: the reasonable Republican, the bridge builder. But Jasmine wasn't here to build bridges over broken ground. She was here to ask if we were even standing on the same soil. In a quiet corner of the green room, Steele scrolled through his phone, eyes narrowing at the reaction. His aide leaned in. "You want to get ahead of this?" Steele stared at the screen. Jasmine's face, frozen mid-question, was already circulating. He locked his phone without answering. Outside, Jasmine stood alone in the hallway, sipping water, scrolling her own mentions. Calm. Like she knew this moment had already outgrown the studio. By nightfall, the clip had become a digital flashpoint. On cable panels, pundits dissected the tone, the delivery, the implications. Conservative voices spun it as a personal attack, identity politics gone too far. Liberal analysts called it a surgical strike on complacency. But Jasmine didn't tweet, didn't retweet, didn't even like a post. She let the moment speak for itself. Meanwhile, in a hotel suite in Georgetown, Michael Steele paced. His team debated response options: a clarification tweet, a statement video, maybe an op-ed. No response, he said finally. Not yet. Let it breathe. But letting it breathe only gave it room to grow. The next morning, Jasmine walked into the Capitol with quiet confidence. No cameras followed her down the hall, but aides and interns turned their heads. Some nodded. Some whispered. One young staffer mouthed "thank you" as she passed. In the press pool outside her office, a journalist called out, "Congresswoman, any comment on Michael Steele's remarks yesterday?" She paused. Smiled slightly. I think the moment commented on itself. Inside, her team was already drafting a message, not a statement, but a response rooted in values. Jasmine didn't want to turn this into a war of soundbites. But she knew something important had shifted. Later that day, at a closed-door caucus meeting, one of her colleagues leaned over. "You realize what you did, right?" Jasmine looked up. "You asked a question we've all swallowed for years. And you made it land." Outside the Capitol, posters had already started appearing, college campuses, community centers, even a mural sketch in Detroit. Jasmine's words, bold in paint, "before being human." And somewhere in Maryland, Michael Steele sat with a pastor friend who simply said, "You can't lead people if you forget who they are." That weekend, Jasmine flew home to Texas. Not to escape the noise, but to listen. At a town hall in Dallas, she stood in front of a packed church basement, no cameras, just folding chairs and raw truth. A single mother asked her, "Do you think things will really change?" Jasmine didn't give the hopeful answer most politicians lean on. She took a second. Then said, "Only if we stop mistaking politeness for progress." The room didn't clap. It nodded. Back in D.C., Steele finally sat down with a journalist for an interview. He was polished, controlled, until the moment came. "Do you regret saying I'm a Republican first?" the interviewer asked. He hesitated. "I regret how it landed." "Do you regret what it meant?" Silence. He shifted in his seat. "I think I underestimated the moment." But America didn't. College students were quoting Jasmine in debate tournaments. Veterans were posting their own reflections on party over principle. Church leaders were using her line as the basis for Sunday sermons. She hadn't just asked a question. She had cracked open a larger one. What does loyalty mean in a country that's fractured? Is it loyalty to a label, or to the people that label is supposed to serve? At Howard University, a young black political science major said during a campus roundtable, she reminded them we're not just votes, they better recognize we're voices. That Sunday night, Jasmine sat alone in her kitchen, lights low, tea in hand. She scrolled past the praise, past the hate, until she paused on one post. A young Latino teen had written, "I didn't know politicians could say stuff like that. I feel seen." Jasmine smiled. She hadn't planned to make headlines. But sometimes, when the moment knocks, you don't step back. You answer. By Monday, a new poll dropped. Jasmine Crockett's name recognition had spiked, not because of a campaign ad, but because of one sentence that echoed louder than a dozen speeches. Cable news called it a rhetorical gut punch. Editorial boards labeled it divisive or daring, depending on their leanings. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She'd expected the backlash. What she didn't expect was the flood of quiet support. In a New Orleans diner, an elderly couple passed her waitress a napkin with a handwritten note, "Tell Jasmine she didn't just speak truth, she spoke it like it belonged." Meanwhile, Michael Steele attended a roundtable hosted by a conservative think tank. As the cameras rolled, someone brought up the exchange. "Let's not get lost in dramatics," Steele said, trying to pivot. "I simply meant." The moderator interrupted. "Before being human?" The audience stiffened. For the first time, Steele's practiced calm cracked. He chuckled nervously, then leaned forward. "We've all said things that sound better in our heads. But I'm willing to have the conversation. Are they?" The question felt hollow, because Jasmine already had. That night, Jasmine went live on Instagram, not planned, just a quiet reflection from her living room. No makeup. No lighting setup. Just her and a front-facing camera. "I don't want to become the story," she said. "But when you hear someone put their party before people, before pain, before progress, you can't stay silent." Tens of thousands tuned in. She didn't yell. She didn't call names. She asked again, what comes first, power, or people? And in kitchens, classrooms, and campaign offices across the country, people began asking it too. The next morning, Jasmine's words were stitched into the American fabric in ways she couldn't have scripted. A principal in Cleveland read her quote over the school intercom before classes began. A group of nurses in Phoenix printed it on buttons for a charity walk. Even a military veteran from Kentucky posted a video, "I wore the uniform for this country, not a party." Jasmine Crockett reminded us of that. But inside the Capitol, the mood had changed. Michael Steele walked through the halls like a man retracing steps he didn't remember taking. Republicans gave him careful nods, supportive, but distanced. Democrats looked at him with measured curiosity. Jasmine? She didn't acknowledge him. She didn't need to. Because her point had already landed, and the nation had already started chewing on it. In the press room, a CNN correspondent whispered to her producer, she didn't just check Steele, she checked everyone who's ever used their label to skip accountability. That day, Steele released a statement. It was 4 paragraphs long. Polished. Reviewed. Cleared. It opened with, "I've been reflecting deeply on what was said, what was meant, and what must come next." It tried to apologize without bending. Jasmine never replied. Instead, she gave a speech at a local college that afternoon. No media, no live stream. Just students. "I'm not asking anyone to renounce their beliefs," she said, pacing slowly. "But I'm asking all of us to rank our values. If humanity doesn't come first, what does that say about who we're becoming?" A student in the back stood up and asked, "What if they still don't hear you?" Jasmine paused. "Then I'll keep saying it, until they can't pretend they didn't." And that promise wasn't just for Michael Steele. It was for every person who'd ever felt like their existence was political only when it was convenient. The ripple effects reached a Sunday political show. The host, a seasoned journalist known for cornering politicians, invited both Jasmine Crockett and Michael Steele, separately. Jasmine declined. Steele accepted. During the segment, the host played the now viral clip of Jasmine's quiet challenge. When the camera cut back, Steele looked hollow. Not defeated, just disarmed. "I've been in politics long enough to know when I've lost a moment," he admitted. "But maybe that's the moment I needed to lose." The host leaned in. "So, do you still consider yourself a Republican first?" Steele exhaled, then looked into the camera. "I consider myself a father first. A citizen second. And if I'm honest, I'm still figuring out what comes after that." But Jasmine Crockett made me question it. That clip went viral too, not because it was fiery, but because it was rare. Online, the reactions split. Some praised Steele's humility. Others called it, too little, too late. One user posted, "It's not just about questioning yourself. It's about what you do once you've got the answer." Meanwhile, Jasmine sat in her office, sifting through emails and handwritten letters. One caught her attention, a note from a high school senior in Mississippi, "I'm the only black student in my civics class. Thank you for saying what I didn't know how to yet." She pinned it to her wall. That evening, she spoke at a fundraiser in Baltimore. Midway through, someone asked how she kept her calm under pressure. Jasmine smiled. Because calm doesn't mean quiet. And clarity doesn't need a scream. People didn't just clap. They stood. It was clear now, this wasn't a one-week headline. It was a shift. A reordering. A reminder that sometimes, the loudest impact comes from a voice that knows exactly when not to flinch. Back in Washington, the energy shifted. Behind closed doors, party strategists began reviewing transcripts of Jasmine's remarks, not for rebuttals, but for patterns. She doesn't attack, one consultant noted. She reframes. Another added, and people believe her because she sounds like she's not performing. Meanwhile, Michael Steele stayed largely out of view. Not silent, just selective. He declined interviews. He canceled a podcast tour. One of his aides leaked a memo: "We underestimated how much people want politics to feel human again." And Jasmine? She didn't wait for them to catch up. She launched a national initiative the following week: "First, we're human." It wasn't a pack. It wasn't a slogan. It was a speaker series, a listening tour, and a scholarship program, all in one. The first stop, Tulsa, Oklahoma. There, in a community center packed wall to wall, Jasmine opened with no script. Just a memory. "My grandfather was a janitor in this city," she began. "He used to say, they can take your job title. They can call you names. But they can't take how you treat people. That's the standard I live by, not a party line." A woman in the audience, white-haired and teary, raised her hand. "Do you really think this country can change?" Jasmine didn't flinch. "I don't think change is something that arrives. I think it's something we do, over and over, until the ground beneath us starts to feel different." People stood again. Not for applause. For understanding. Across social media, the quote lit up. And Michael Steele, watching from a quiet hotel in New Hampshire, closed his laptop and whispered, "She's not trying to win votes. She's trying to win a better country." For the first time in his career, he felt small, but not insignificant. He felt challenged in a way that called him forward, not back. And Jasmine? She was just getting started. The final city on the tour was Atlanta. By now, the "First, We're Human" movement had become more than a campaign. It was a force. Talked about on morning shows, quoted in graduation speeches, reposted by artists and athletes alike. Even congressional opponents stopped underestimating Jasmine. They started rehearsing for her. The Atlanta venue was oversold. Lines curled around the building. Inside, people stood shoulder to shoulder, waiting, not for entertainment, but for truth. Jasmine took the stage in her signature navy suit, no podium, no barrier. Just her and the crowd. "I'm not here to fix Washington," she began. "I'm here because too many of us have let Washington define who belongs." She let the words breathe. Then she continued, "Michael Steele said he was a Republican first. I asked, before being human? And look, he heard me. That's the point. We don't need everyone to agree. But we do need everyone to listen." The crowd didn't erupt. It exhaled. Like someone finally put language to what they'd all felt for years. Backstage, an aide handed her a folded letter. It was from Michael. "Jasmine. I've been in politics a long time. I've seen charisma, fire, and noise. But what you did, what you're doing, that's different. You made me reconsider what I defend. That's not weakness. That's growth. If you ever want to sit down, no cameras, I'd be honored to listen." She folded the letter and smiled. Later that night, she went live on social media for 5 minutes. Just 5. She said, "Growth isn't a betrayal. Silence isn't always survival. And leadership, real leadership, isn't about being the loudest. It's about being the clearest." One user commented, "She just redefined the tone of the next decade." And maybe she had. 2 weeks later, the Senate hosted a bipartisan symposium on political discourse. Normally dry, mostly symbolic. But this time, something felt different. Because Jasmine Crockett walked in. And Michael Steele was already there, waiting in the second row. The topic on the docket, civic duty and human decency. Jasmine didn't bring notes. She didn't need them. When she stepped to the mic, the entire room leaned in. There was a time, she began, when asking for empathy was seen as weakness. When party came before people. And when the loudest voice got the final word. But that time is ending. Eyes turned to Steele. He nodded, just once. I'm not here to erase divisions, Jasmine said. I'm here to remind you that beneath every debate is a person. And if we forget that, we lose more than votes, we lose ourselves. Silence. Then something rare happened, a standing ovation, from both sides of the aisle. Later, in a quiet corridor, Jasmine and Michael finally met face to face. No cameras. No staff. He spoke first. You changed the conversation. She smiled. We changed it. Their handshake wasn't performative. It was earned. Not reconciliation. Not agreement. But something braver, recognition. Outside, a reporter shouted, Jasmine, will this be your next campaign? She didn't answer immediately. Then she turned. No. This is everyone's campaign now. That moment, the humility, the force, the clarity, traveled farther than any ad could. It wasn't about right or left anymore. It was about remembering who we are when no one is watching. And in that remembering, something deeper stirred. Not politics. But possibility. They called it a moment. But it wasn't. It was a shift. A shift in how we speak. How we listen. How we lead. Michael Steele thought loyalty meant silence. Jasmine Crockett reminded him, and all of us, that loyalty without humanity is just obedience. She didn't scream. She didn't fold. She asked the one question that burned through the noise. Before being human? And that question echoed louder than any speech. It wasn't just about politics. It was about people. In every city, every town, every overlooked voice, it was heard. And in that silence that followed, we didn't just witness leadership. We remembered what it looks like. Not flashy. Not angry. Just honest. And in today's America, honesty is the most radical act of all.